Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another 50 Acres Academy webinar. Today's webinar is about social media marketing for not-for-profits, and I'm going to take you through what it is and some of the latest trends and what you need to do to manage it. What essentially, what is it really? A lot of people talk about marketing and tips and tricks, but we'll cover them and drill down into them and get right in there. Just a warning, if I work, we have a virtual agency, 50 Acres, for some of you who know us, and I work from a home-based office. If you hear a small puppy in the background at any point, it's because I have a new puppy in the house, so my apologies in advance for that, but he is quite cute. So let's get started. And the other thing that I always say to people is please don't hesitate to drop in your questions as we go into the box, and I'll get through them as we go, or keep them until the end. It's really up to you. But if there's a question that you've got in your mind as we go through, just pop it in the box and we'll get to it. That's not a problem at all. So what are we going to cover today? What's social media marketing and why is it important in the first place? Some of the latest trends in social media marketing in the not-for-profit space, what you need to do to get across it, and the platforms and how best to use them to make social media marketing work for you and your organisation. And as I said before, please don't hesitate to ask questions at any point during the webinar. We'll go through to close to 12. We might finish a little bit before 12, but we'll aim to be finished certainly by 12. So let's get cracking and think firstly about what social media is and why the heck is it important in the first place. People talk about it and we really need to understand what it is before we go much further. So social media marketing really is, in its very simplest definition, it's gaining website traffic or attention through social media sites. We all do it. But it's about trying to maximise those sites to get website traffic and get attention. Essentially, that's what it boils down to. Social media marketing, it focuses on creating content that attracts attention and encourages readers or your users to share it with their own social networks. That's often called amplification. So in that way, a message will spread, proselytize, if you want to call it that, from user to user, and it's amplified, because it comes from a trusted or a third-party source. It's not just you talking about what you're doing, which obviously is, sycophantic, and we all do it. Often we're our own, we're our only advocates, but it's always great and better if you can get someone else to advocate on your behalf in terms of social media networks. That's why we're always hankering over likes and retweets, and we'll talk about that in a little while. So it's marketing really driven by word of mouth or word of tweet or Facebook post effectively, or word of human contact effectively, and it results in earned media, rather than paid media. You're earning it from the amplification that you've endeavoured and you've done, rather than paying for it with an ad, for example, on social media. The plus for not-for-profits is that social media is a relatively inexpensive platform for organisations to do and to use in your marketing campaigns. I'm sure you all know that, and that's probably why some of you are on today. So why is it important in the first place? Well, as I've been saying for some years now, it's happening. And if, I'm often speaking at conferences and I ask for a show of hands about organisations, sometimes organisations that have got 100 or more people and who's yet to get on to social media, and you would be surprised at the amount of organisations that aren't doing it. They may have taken the platform, they may have reserved the handle, but they're not using it, or it's dormant. And, I think we don't really need to be told anymore, and we shouldn't do. And if you haven't started doing it, you really do need to embrace it as quickly as you can, because it's often the main way people are campaigning or communicating with each other. Another key reason is it'll improve your search ranking. We all know that, the more organic or verifiable or credible references we have on Google, the greater our search rankings. So if you can get other people to retweet you, repost you, rebadge you, whatever, reblog you, that's all sources of positive search engine ranking for Google. So that's another really good reason. There's a real advantage with it. Doing it will give you a competitive advantage over perhaps another organisation in a similar space to yours, or another company or that is doing a similar thing to you. That's always a good thing. It will reduce costs. It's a no-brainer, really, in my mind. Think about how we used to market, people used to send, and I still do. I still send cards and handwritten notes and things to people, and that's something different, really. It's a different form of marketing. But for mass marketing, no longer do we need to lick envelopes and stick stamps on envelopes. We can do, but quite frankly, it's reasonably outmoded these days. So it'll reduce staff costs and actual costs in terms of envelopes and stamps and all of those things. So it's a really good thing to embrace for that reason. It'll help you connect with your stakeholders and your donors. So it's an easy one to do for that reason. And it'll help build trust with your networks and boost your profile. And some is linked back to that search thing, but it'll build your profile just broadly because you need to network with the people that you want to, get into your circle of, third-party and trusted supporters, and it's a way of doing that. So let's think about now the latest not-for-profit social media marketing trends and predictions. And, things are changing all the time. It's a rapidly evolving space, and, we can't always be across everything every couple of days. My 13-year-old son is showing me a new app that's out. There's a new one out just in the last few days by this crazy blogger in the US, which is sort of going to take over where Tumblr left off. But there's a new app every few days that some cool person somewhere in America is coming up with, but we can't always be across everything. But what we can do is have a think about the broad stuff that's happening out there and how people are doing things. One of the things that I would recommend, if you're thinking about campaigning in this space, if you're a not-for-profit, I'd be interested to know if there's anyone on the line today who isn't a not-for-profit, who's in a company or you've got a corporate agenda. Please perhaps indicate, just so I can make sure that I'm focusing my attention on both areas. But certainly in the not-for-profit space, there's a lot of stuff out there that's really interesting. I'm a member of an international network, an online network which looks at trends and shares information, globally from the States through to the UK and across Europe. And they're talking constantly there about all sorts of different ways of using, online petitions through to developing websites, through to like buttons, all sorts of things. There's a couple of people on the line who are from various companies, so I'll make sure that I'm trying to hit both areas. But there's a hell of a lot of information online, and what I would urge you to do is, if there's something that you're thinking about doing, have a really good scan online before you start doing it. But I'm just going to cover here some of the key trends that are sort of hitting social media marketing at the moment. So one of the things that I think is happening is companies, and this really is about the nexus between companies and not-for-profits, because often not-for-profits turn to companies and corporate partners for connections. And so this is really where those two things connect. Building trust is, I think, the new cornerstone of successful storytelling. People really want to associate with brands who have an ethical and social agenda, that goes beyond their own profits. People will value companies that demonstrate those values. So, we all know about, we can all feel good about buying liquid soap in the supermarket that gives it 1 cent per packet to somewhere. We need to feel that is that the company's doing it for the right reasons. We can, be happy about, Coca-Cola getting involved with some sort of not-for-profit initiative. But perhaps I think these days the trend is moving in the direction of we need to understand that the company as a whole, in its totality, from its sort of very roots, is embracing those principles across what they're doing. I mean, what's really interesting, and I'm sure I'm not trying to predict, and I don't want to, obviously make any comments because there is, I think, legal action pending. But Grill'd, the hamburger chain, you may have heard about this in the news in the last few days. Some of you have may have gone there, and what's really interesting about Grill'd is, if you've gone to Grill'd, you'll see that in the corner that they've got these glass jars that you can elect to put in, a coupon, and they'll give 10 cents per customer or something, whatever it is, to a charity, and it's usually a local charity, which is really interesting. So, but in the last few days, they're in the media for the wrong reasons, and those reasons are that allegedly they're not paying their staff the right wages, the minimum or the proper wage level. So that's an interesting counterpoint to the image that they're trying to portray when you go into their restaurants. So, on the one hand, you want to make sure that you are demonstrating those principles right across the board. You can't always ensure that, everything that the company does is perfect if you're working with a company, but you can try and make sure that the public face of the company is obviously reflects what it is doing privately. So big brands are being much more socially mindful, and I think we can expect to see that even more moving forward. So more lighthearted, cause-driven campaigns. I think Angie just said before that she was having problems hearing me. Let me know if that's still a problem, Andrea. So, I think leveraging lighthearted events and fun to make a serious message spread more quickly is an increasing trend. We've all seen, last year and in recent months, the Ice Bucket Challenge. I'm personally involved with a music festival here near where I live. I live near Canberra in a little town called Gundaroo, which is just outside of Canberra, New South Wales. We've got a Gundaroo Music Festival, which came about because a father at the school that my kids went to or go to got diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And so that festival kicked off 3 years ago. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. But one of the things that's been a rip-roaring success at the festival for the last few years has been the Ice Bucket Challenge. People have been queuing up to do it. And every time they enter, I think they donated $100 or whatever it was to have a bucket of ice poured on them. It was probably the most awful thing that you could ever do in some respects, but it's a lighthearted thing. It's obviously meant, for those of you who don't know, it's meant to mimic the sensation that people get when they've got motor neuron disease, that sort of awful sensation of neuralgia, I suppose, down your spine. Enormously successful at that local level, enormously successful online. It went viral and it continues to do that. Obviously not quite at the level that it did when it was at its height, but it was a great example of something that can really work. And having a think about the ways you might be able to do that and get people motivated to do that is a great thing. People don't, want to share things that are bleak. I mean, sometimes they do, but they want to, by and large, share things that are optimistic. And so I think that's a really good lesson in terms of our social media and how we're managing it. I think one of the really interesting things that's happening is focus on global health issues, or focus on issues worldwide. It's really a very increasing trend. We've seen the Ebola crisis. We've seen a lot of other, not just health, but obviously, when there's been a natural disaster, the world steps in and social media comes into its own. But I think in some respects, health crises and health issues work very well with social media and sharing. There's more human personal stories of those affected by disease around the world. The stories are, a really excellent way for viral campaigns to raise awareness, grow funds to deal with that particular problem, and obviously, hopefully, finding a solution for the particular problem that they're dealing with. Sometimes that's just about sharing information about what's happening. Sometimes it's, trying to recruit more people to support the cause or come in and offer their expertise. But for a whole range of reasons, I think social media works really well in that space. I think the other thing that's really interesting at the moment is that people are not just calling for people to do one thing. It's not just that they're saying, sign this petition. No longer do we, I think, gone are the days of necessarily having a simple call to action. I think that people are used to being able to divide their time. I heard an interesting review of a play a few days ago on Life Matters, which was, I'm not sure, I can't remember the name of it, but it had 100 characters in it. And I think 8 people played 100 characters. But it was meant to represent the enormity of the conversations and the communication that we have at the same time. And I think one of the things that's really interesting these days, if you think about it right now even, what are you doing? Before I obviously switched on here, I'm talking to you, so I'm focusing on that. But I may have had a number of screens open on my laptop, on my computer. I had Facebook, I had Twitter. I'm doing a search on something else. I've got my email open. I'm looking at some other platform. I might be texting on the phone. So there's a multiplicity of platforms and communication and conversations we're having at one time. And I think no longer do we have to just restrain ourselves to asking someone just to do one thing. I think they're able to do well, cope with multitasking. We used to say that only women can multitask. I think that's probably now changing. And I think that, social media is demanding us to be able to do that. So, charities are, specifying a whole range of different things they can do, from, asking people to donate money at the same time as helping boost, views for a particular video. It can range, you can achieve a whole range of different things with one campaign, fundraising and awareness at the same time, or whatever it is that you want it to do. The other thing, one other interesting trend that I think is really worth thinking about is the user-generated video submissions. And, there's a whole range of ways you can do that. Getting back to, we're running a couple of campaigns at the moment. We're working on a large disability expo that's in Sydney this weekend, and we're asking people to submit things for that. We're working with a community service provider, which covers half of regional New South Wales. We're looking at doing something online photographically with them at some point. The Gundaroo Music Festival got people to post their ice bucket challenge. It's really it's just built for people to share user-generated submissions, and whether that's a video, whether that's an Instagram competition, it's about trying to encourage people to participate in that campaign in a visual way, and it's there. It's easily done. We can have a tiny little camera which shoots video and stills. We can edit it on a laptop, or we can even edit it in our phones. So, it's just there for the using, and it's a great thing to be able to get people to be motivated and encourage them to get involved. Whether that's a short film festival, short form film that you might ask people to submit, a 1 minute or 30-second film about a particular issue. It's a very, very authentic way that can then be redistributed across a range of platforms, including, YouTube, Tumblr, Instagram and others. You can start your own YouTube channel and brand that. There's a whole range of ways that you can use video and user-based, user-generated submissions. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. I think the other really interesting trend is emphasising the emotionally compelling stories. Stories won't ever stop being part of the human experience. You know, it's not just necessarily about, you know, it's all about pretty pictures on Instagram and the world's just wonderful, because if we looked at Instagram or Pinterest, we'd think that that was what it was. I think it's about connecting those stories, which then in turn connect our emotions with our thinking. So emotionally compelling, really well told stories of humans, you know, overcoming adversity, you know, are overtaking, you know, those cliched case studies. So, you know, you can have a case study that has a photo and it can be quite illustrative, but it can also be quite flat. So I think you need to really think about, you know, from a perspective of a journalist, put yourself into a journalist's way of thinking and think, how would a journalist think about this? What would it be that they would grab hold of here? What would it be that they would want to do here and talk about? And grab hold of that and talk like a journalist if you possibly can do. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an extraordinary writer. Keep it simple. Keep it tabloid. By tabloid, I don't mean, you know, stupid and monosyllabic. I just mean keep it at a really simple, plain English level. And those stories, I think, will work really well. If you think about the project, and I'm sure many of you watch the project, I think it's a perfect place, perfect destination for those in the not-for-profit space to watch. And to really absorb the sort of stories that they like doing. I mean, not a night goes past that they don't do some sort of story that is sort of sad and whatever, but generally out of those stories comes something positive. And so you need to think about how they, you know, as an exercise, if you're thinking about campaigning, you know, sit down and watch the project for a week and really think about how they do it. And I think that's a really good example of storytelling. And if you can think about how they tell their stories and tell it to them like they tell it themselves, I think you'll be halfway there in terms of succeeding with getting a pitch successfully through to those sorts of programs. We're about to pitch to the project for a client in the next couple of days. And so we're trying to, you know, we're giving them an exclusive about something. We're going to, you know, literally package it up so that there is some stills that they can cover. There's something local in Melbourne they can film. There's someone they can have as a talking head. There's some real, you know, clarity in terms of, you know, from doing this results. And it's a lovely little package. And so I think you need to think about, you know, when you give stories to someone, package it up and making sure that it's emotionally compelling is absolutely key to that, I think. Partnerships, you know, are particularly important, and this is a very important trend I think that's happening. And social cause storytelling, you know, is at its most effective when users can easily see a particularly authentic connection between the brand and the cause. So that when it's when the partnership resonates and when it makes sense to people. So, you know, give you a really good example. I was a finalist in the Anthill Social Capitalist of the Year award. It sounds like an odd sounding award, but that's what it was a couple of years ago. And I was up against a company called I Give a Crap. And you may have heard of it, but it's a company that produces sort of, you know, if you like, exclusive toilet paper, I think it is, and bespoke toilet paper. And people get it shipped to their doorstep. And they give, I think it's 50% of their profits to developing countries to help them build toilets, basically. So there's a real connection. Of course, he won the award, as my son predicted. He said, what I did, I just wasn't as cool as a company called I Give a Crap. But, you know, he's got a real emotional connection and a real partnership for what he's doing, and it's very authentic. So I think when you can establish those sorts of connections and partnerships, you know, that the brand storytelling then is really easily done. It can become personalized. You know, companies, you know, won't just be able to have a successful campaign by just merely supporting a cause, you know, just signing a check and going, oh yeah, we gave to blah, blah, blah this year. And so we're feeling okay about that. We're feeling okay about ourselves, so we can get up in the morning and feel all right. It's more important, I think, now to have a genuine legitimate connection doesn't necessarily mean that you have to search for a company that does something that's aligned to you, production-wise. I mean, I live on a 50 acres near Canberra. I mean, I have a couple of old horses my kids ride. I'm not involved with anything to do with, the rehabilitation of horses at the moment. But, I do quite a lot of work in the rural and regional space. And for me, that's an opportunity for me to be able to connect with a community that I have something to do with a lot of the time. So, but it's obviously not the only thing we do. So, find that thing that works for you and go with it and see what that, how that works for you. So the connection, needs to be really clear, and it needs to be real to the end user. It needs to be legitimate, or it'll be seen as totally dishonest, I think. This is a really interesting trend, I think, solving problems by sharing. And, if you think about it, there's a whole lot of stuff out there these days, lots of platforms that are doing all sorts of stuff. I read just recently about this new site called IdeaPod, which apparently Richard Branson likes, so that's just fabulous. But have a look at it. But there's other ones that are out there that are doing this stuff, that are sort of sharing ideas. This network that I'm involved in, people are sharing ideas. Crowdfunding in some respects shares ideas and brings people together. I think campaigns allow people to solve a problem, not just publicize it. So it's about trying to say, it's a shout out. It's asking people to come in and ask for some help. How can you get involved? In a real sense, not just giving money, but what else can you do? How can you? It might just be that you can help by rolling your sleeves up and doing something. It may be that you are doing something more than that. It might be lending your professionals support to something in some ways. This will give, the like, the tweet and the share buttons, absolutely real, power. The Ice Bucket Challenge, again, is a really good example in giving audiences the ability to make a real impact through sharing. And, what's really interesting, this fellow that developed motor neuron disease here in Gundaroo near Canberra, he was part of a research trial which was looking at trying to establish some links about what was the trigger for motor neuron disease. And one of the triggers that he was part of a trial in is the connection of blue-green algae, the exposure to blue-green algae, particularly through adolescence and when you're younger, is now being looked at very closely, not just in Australia, but I think in the US, for a real trigger for motor neuron disease. And that's something that he had exposure to when he was a kid. So, he was able to participate in an interesting trial and obviously very, very much give back to the community through a music festival, which this year is going to have Mental as Anything headlining. Some of you may not remember or may not know Mental as Anything, but some of you may know them. But it's become a very, very successful festival just inside in the sort of Canberra space. So there's all sorts of ways that one person, I think, can contribute to that. So what do you need to do? Let's think about that in terms of making something work. Geo-targeting, I think, is a really good thing to think about. The trend for not-for-profits to run targeted local level marketing campaigns, it's really a combination of some other successful marketing approaches. Some of you may have heard of geo-targeting, some of you may have done it. Personal interaction with brands and organisations, the desire for a better customised user experience, and an increased focus on user-generated content, I think is where we need to head with all of this. It's targeting your social media campaign allows organisations to avoid the overcrowded traditional media channels and speak directly to the people who want to hear from them in a way that's really helpful and relevant. And I'll give you a really good example of that. I mean, there's a couple of great examples. A lot of people think that people say that Barack Obama won last time by this absolutely small scale, local level geo-targeting at us in social media. That they did these little micro campaigns based on as little as just a couple of blocks, as they call them in the little neighborhoods in the US. And it was through that innovative, very, very local level geo-targeted social media campaign that a lot of people say that they got the message out. And it's one of the things that political parties here in Australia do really well. Often political parties don't want you to think about the leader. It's not the leader that's necessarily the sexy thing in an election campaign for whatever reason, but the actual political party wants you to think about how they're helping you solve a problem in your life just around the corner. So it's often about door knocking. It's often about, getting that local level message out, and you can achieve that sort of door knocking, if you like, through social media. And doing that in terms of Facebook, you can, or Twitter, you can. We'll explore a bit later on how you can specifically hone in and do some of this stuff. But really, really drilling down to that local level really works really well. And you can not just geo-target, but you can look at targeting on the basis of activities. I'm sure some of you, I'm not sure whether any of you have looked at social media. Advertising can do really well with advertising. This is about the marketing stuff that doesn't cost you. You can market it without having to pay anything, and you can geo-target without having to open your wallet, which is a good thing. We'll explore that in just a minute when we get down to the actual platforms. We talked a little bit about that before, and the cost benefit of social media marketing is extraordinary. So social media marketing costs significantly less than traditional marketing, and produces significantly more leads for each dollar spent. So while social media doesn't have the permanence of a billboard or the splash of it, of a newspaper ad, it does allow organisations to really exponentially increase their reach by tapping into their networks, as and while they are sharing their content, which is really harder to do with a poster at a bus stop. You can target that content far more than you can with a newspaper. You really don't. Yes, you know that you want to perhaps advertise in a particular spot, in terms of a poster. You know that you may want to advertise in Fairfax rather than News Limited, or rather than a tabloid. You sort of can get that. You can make a choice to have an online ad in X rather than Y. You can do all of that. But the thing about geo-targeting is you can really drill down and almost psychoanalyze the audience that you're trying to target your stuff to. So really, really explore that when you are doing any sort of campaigning. And ads allow you to do that even more. Obviously, Facebook and Twitter want you to be able to spend money, and so they're making it very attractive. They're letting you get access in many respects to the back end of their platforms and their how they structure their database. You obviously you can't choose individuals to target, but you can almost do that by nominating who it is you're going to target, for example, in Twitter for an ad, or in Facebook for an ad. So it is important to have a think about that when you're doing this stuff. So social media's democratic nature, I think, also makes it easy for organisations to meet the demand for user-generated content, which is seen as more trustworthy. As we said before, if you have someone else saying that you're great, it's better than you saying you're great. But it's one of the reasons why I have testimonials on my website. When I send someone a proposal, I'll send a testimonial, which is a legitimate thing that I put on there. Obviously, I'm not going to put a bad testimonial on. I haven't got any of those so far, so touch wood. But those are the things that you use. It's the same sort of stuff. Just yesterday, the last couple of days, we've been putting a shout out for this disability forum in Disability Expo in Sydney. And we got David Koch, Georgie from the project, we got Wendy Harmer, we got a whole bunch of other, celebrities to retweet what we asked them to do about this disability expo on the weekend. We hadn't had any form of prior contact with them. They were not involved with the organisation. We literally just asked them to do a retweet. And it was great that they did that combined. There was, 200,000 audience, 200,000 people that they've reached that we couldn't have reached necessarily even from a paid ad. So it gives that it gives that legitimacy. It encourages that amplification, and it is a really, shout out is one thing that you can think of, but it's well worth thinking about how you get those third party supporters to back you in various ways. So let's have a think now about the platforms specifically and how best to deploy them. If you have any questions so far, do put them up. I'm happy to get to any questions at any point. But we'll go through the actual platforms now, and we'll have a think about the best way of utilising those, because fundamentally it comes down to various platforms. As I said before, there's a platform a day at the moment, or there's a new app each day. You'd go mad if you wanted to get across them all. I'm sure people have gone mad thinking that they're going to get across them all. But notwithstanding, there's a couple of key ones, and I'm sure we know what those are. It's Twitter and it's Facebook, Instagram, and possibly Pinterest, depending on how you market yourself and whether you've got a good, strong photo story that, or network or whatever that you want to publicize. So, the most popular social media channels, Twitter is really the best in many respects for engaging in personal conversations with your particular community, and I'm sure you have done that. I'll just get to a couple of questions now. Karuna's asked me, in terms of the reduced cost of social media marketing, you might save on advertising, printing costs, and perhaps administrative costs, but the time, energy, and ingenuity required for social media are all very resource intensive. We'll get to that in a second. You're right, Karuna, but I think you also have to have thought and strategies to develop any sort of marketing. So I probably would disagree with you there. I think the actual cost of the outreach per person is cheaper, and I think I probably wouldn't agree with you. Karina says, engaging with audiences often requires high-level strategic planning and thought, which will inevitably cost more. I think you need to have high-level strategic thought for whatever you do. If you don't do that, you're missing a beat. You're really missing a trick. If you don't think strategically before you go out and communicate with anyone at any point using anything, whether that's a letter, whether it's a handwritten note, whether it's a post-it note on a door, whether it's a guerrilla marketing experiential something or other, it's you've got to have some sort of strategic thinking behind it. Otherwise, you are really missing an opportunity. Karina asked me, do organizations need to consider carving out a dedicated social media role, or how do we use what you have to engage in social media activity effectively? Well, some organizations have a dedicated person, some of them don't. And I think you need to see what you've got. I mean, I talk to organizations regularly that have got 63 people working there. I then talk to people who've got 1.5 people. You've got to be able to do what you can afford and what you can manage. And I'm very firmly talked to a client yesterday, big national organisation. Everyone would know who they are. I'm not going to tell you their names, but it's a national, not-for-profit that you would know, and they're thinking about strategically how they're going to move forward and grow. And so we're thinking about deploying all sorts of things, from media to earned media to paid media to social media. We're fighting a number of campaigns, if you like, or running a number of campaigns simultaneously and seeing what works best. And so I think it is about trying to see what you can do, and if you can go on the front foot, often that will have a beautiful circle that will close, and you will grow your funds, you will grow your support, and therefore be able to then expand their organisation by virtue of doing that. So I do urge people to try and do as much as they can in this space, because I think that then brings in supporters and funds as a consequence. I'll just answer a couple more questions. Mahiri asks me, when you ask celebrities retweet, is that just via tagging them on Twitter, or have you written to them individually with background information? No, we just literally rocked up. You can have a look at the website is Pozible. It's Disability Expo. Actually, Bridget, when we send out the slide pack a bit later on today, we'll send you a link to it. We literally just rocked up and said, "Hi, Koshi, would you do a shout out for blah? It's the biggest disability expo ever in Australia." Or we used a couple of different ones. We literally asked 100 people to do retweets, and we got a number of them yesterday. So we just literally blazingly asked them on Twitter. I have met David Koch because I wrote a book with Melissa Doyles a couple of years ago, but I didn't use my personal connection on this occasion at all. It was just rocking up and asking them, and then they do it. I'm sure they're asked to do this stuff a lot, but they will do it, or they don't do it. If they're looking at Twitter, they'll do it if they feel like it, or they don't do it if they don't feel like it. So, I think that's one of the reasons why we hit a whole bunch of people yesterday, and we're going to do even more later in the week, because it's statistical. It's you've got to try a whole lot of people before you're going to get them all. You're not going to get Madonna to retweet on the first occasion. You might have to ask a couple of times. Yes, no, Alexandra said, will you be sending the slides out after the webinar? Yes, we will. You will be sending the slides out, and you'll also be able to get the recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel. So we'll send you out a link to that, so you can actually, if you'd like, just play that to them, or just use the slides, whatever you feel like. It's up to you. So let's go back to Twitter. Tools like the geolocated search in Hootsuite make it really easy to find potential connections by searching for Twitter activity in a specific geographic area. There are other platforms that use that sort of thing, but have a look at Hootsuite, and it's a really good tool there. Location searches are available within the Twitter platform itself using the advanced search function. What's really important is the quality of the conversation that you're going to have with them, with the people that you actually find. So that's really important. Carmel asks me, sorry, I'm just clicking on that. Is Wikipedia still relevant to an organisation's profile? Yeah, but unless you have a legitimate sort of people adding to it, and other than yourself, Wikipedia gets onto you these days, and they realise, and they'll either get rid of the page, or they'll whatever. So you need to get people to try and add to that Wikipedia page. So I certainly think Wikipedia is valid, but there's a whole lot of other ways that you can increase your Twitter search ranking, and that's one of them. Advertising is one. Employing an SEO company, or communications agency is another one, or just getting a whole lot of people who will repost what you're saying, or getting a whole lot of legitimate links back to your site is probably the easiest thing to do. So let's just get back to Twitter. What's really important? Oh, sorry, I've said that, so I'll move on to the next slide. Sorry. So Facebook. Facebook's a really rich source of information and a great platform for discovery. There's two central ingredients really for building your network. I'm just answering another question from Juliet. We found that Juliet says that she's got some clients, I'm not sure where you're from, Juliet, but that don't want to pay a lot for social media management. It's time intensive to manage finding content. How do you make it viable? We generally will do social media management as part of an overall communications strategy. People will come to you often and want to just do social media, and we will do that. We'll just put out one media release if we want, if a client wants it. It really depends on what they need. So I think you've got to try and explain to them where it fits in across the board, and quantify what that looks like in terms of the time and effort that you're going to spend. Let's just get back to Facebook. Facebook, as I said, is a really useful platform. It allows you to target promoted posts to specific regions, but it also gives you the option to target your everyday posts without spending money. You need to use the settings in the admin panel. Another useful tool at your disposal is the Facebook Places directory, with new faces like Place Tips, which provide suggestions to users based on their location. So if you've got a service or a not-for-profit that works, in a particular area or does particular service in a particular geographical space, that's something to have a look at for sure. Facebook's making a place for itself in the hyper-local marketing amongst the likes of Yelp and Google Places. So really explore those opportunities and have a look at how they work. It's really well worth it. Instagram and Pinterest are two other platforms that I think we should have a think about. Instagram, be interested to know if any of you, have found that extraordinarily useful. Instagram is certainly where I think, teenagers are centered, and, teenagers through to sort of people in their early 20s. It's often a place where people are using as an alternative to email. As is Snapchat, but I think Instagram provides a permanence that obviously Snapchat doesn't. So, I think Instagram is well worth exploring if you've got something that is photographically viable, if you've got a story or a message that can be communicated in a photographic way. Otherwise it's you can try and push it. You can even advertise on Instagram these days. It's not as cheap as Twitter or as cheap as Facebook, but it's something that you can do. I think the key is to treat Instagram likes and comments like a personal conversation with the goal of building relationships, much like on Twitter. The good thing about Instagram when you're having a conversation on a particular page is that you can a whole lot of comments are sort of gathered in one spot, which I think is quite nice. Whereas on Twitter, it's sort of, you turn in one direction, have a conversation, then you're turning in another direction, have a conversation. And so, you never really have a conversation with a bunch of people at the same time. So I think it's well worth having a look at that and trying to build up, depending on who you are and what you're doing, I think it's well worth having a look at that as a particular platform to explore. Pinterest, I like. There's a lot of, it's very visual. If you've got something that you're doing that, if you are running a competition, for example, that's got, or you're encouraging people to take photos of a particular experience, or if you're an organisation that does experiential activities or whatever it is, or you're creative, it's a perfect place to be able to share with your community what you're doing on a whole range of levels. You can have a whole bunch of boards representing the sort of breadth of the activity that you do as an organisation, and I think it's a perfect way to be able to showcase some of that work that you do, and I like it as a platform. I probably like Instagram better, but Pinterest, you can have it all sitting there in one place. And again, all of these things, Instagram and Pinterest, they're all being, ranked in terms of Google, and it's important to try and grab hold of these things where you can. You may not be able to manage servicing more than just Twitter and Facebook, and if that's the case, go with that. Don't worry about it. Don't freak out. Don't get up in the morning and go, oh my goodness, I just can't manage Instagram and Pinterest. I can't do it. Do what you can manage. But if you are going to play around with it, have a look at Instagram, perhaps explore Pinterest, because I think, maybe don't post there as often. Post when you have something that's, good to pop in there. The other thing about Instagram is when you pop a post on Instagram, you probably are aware of this, but you can then send it automatically to Twitter and to Facebook. So it's got that benefit as well. So essentially, sorry, we're going to, this is just a little summary here. So if anyone's got any other questions, we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. How do you get started? Well, let's just wrap up and have a summary of where we've got to. I think the important thing is to identify goals. You need to think about what you want to achieve and what are the metrics that you want to impact before you launch any new marketing strategy. I think these goals, can really help you get clear on which tactics are right for you, and make it easier to measure your ROI. I think you need to decide on your budget. So while social media is much more affordable than a traditional marketing, it isn't free, as someone pointed out a little bit earlier. From staff time to paid ads, the costs really add up. So you need to take the time to quantify what those costs might be. Set a budget before you get started. These will help make sure that you don't get carried away in the middle of the campaign, because it's like anything. You're in a shop, you see a bunch of lollies, and you want a few more than you think you really need or can afford. So really set some constraints and some parameters before you get going. Choose your tools. It's best to focus on a few channels and invest in your presence on those really well than to have mediocre engagement on a wide range of platforms. Take a careful look at each social network and choose the ones that make the most sense for your organisation to focus on. As I just said a little bit before, it may be that Twitter and Facebook is what you can manage, and that's fair enough. But if there's some others that you can look at, there's some others that you might just love. And that I haven't mentioned today, there's a whole bunch of them out there. And that's not to say you can't explore, and a lot of these will dovetail into some of these other platforms like Twitter and Facebook. So, what I would say is, if you are choosing some platforms, if you can try and make them platforms that you can put onto a social media management platform, I think that's really helpful. Like Sprout Social or Market Me Suite or Buffer. These are platforms that you can use to post once, and they go on a multiplicity of platforms simultaneously, so it saves you a lot of time. So I would urge you to do that if you're going to be exploring a number of platforms. Something like Buffer, Buffer, you can use a number of pages of your own. I mean, I have, for example, a 50 Acres Facebook page, personal Facebook page, a 50 Acres Twitter account, and a personal Twitter account, as well as a LinkedIn group that I've established, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've got them all on Buffer, and so I can post to all of those things, like 7 or 8 platforms or something, all at the same time. So it's really economical that I can just put 140 characters or 100 characters in a photo and just, press the button and off it goes. And it's a really effective way of time management. I've got 2 more questions here. I'll just deal with those now. Olivia asked, is in an office environment, how much time, i.e. hours per day or week, should be dedicated to social media? That's a good question, Olivia. And actually, I'm going to deal with that in a lot of detail in the next webinar, and I'll give you a slide about what date that is and time. But essentially, I think in a nutshell, I actually think you can use something like Buffer and effectively schedule things in an hour a week. That's not to say you can't go back and not touch it again. I think you need to go back and keep a check on it, but you shouldn't necessarily have to be sitting there all day, every day. And I think there's a lot of people who are self-checking themselves these days. I think, as I often say, the first iPhone only came on the market when Kevin Rudd was elected Prime Minister, dare I say. And, that's not that long ago. And I think one of the things that I think we're becoming better at is putting it down. Not necessarily my 13-year-old son, but I think us as adults, are getting better at putting those devices down and going, okay, I'm going to cook now, I'm going to do some exercise now, I'm going to read a book now. I think there's a whole lot of stuff about the consciousness of doing social media. So I think, if we can put some parameters around that, I think, you could be a full-time social media manager for an organization. If you are, that's fantastic. That doesn't mean that you can sit there all day staring at a screen. I think, sometimes you need to obviously have a screen break, but you need to also not necessarily be sitting on the platforms themselves, but reading about trends and other, exploring other things. But Olivia, we will deal with that in some detail at the next webinar in a month's time. The next question was, she just said, she's a supervisor who hasn't got an experience as a staff member doing it. So yeah, we'll deal with that in some detail in the next webinar. So if there's no more questions, sorry, there is someone just said thank you and look forward to getting the slides. Thanks, Alexandra. And thanks very much to everyone for sitting through. Today we had I think 91 people registered, which is great. And thanks very much for sitting through. Our next webinar will be on August the 18th, in a month's time at 11 a.m. We'll send out a reminder and a way to register about how to be super efficient and maximize your time on social media, the tools and the tips. So we'll be covering that. And again, thinking a little bit about mindfulness about this stuff as well. So thanks so much, everyone. Again, thanks so much for joining in and sitting through a webinar. And thank you very much to everyone that's saying thank you to me now, which is lovely of you. Bridget, Olivia and Janelle. And Janelle asks, is it possible to have a copy of the slides? Yes, we are sending those slides out. Julie, Vi and Mahiri, they're coming through to you, and thanks so much for your thanks in the question box. It's been lovely speaking with you all, and have a lovely day, and look forward to talking with you again in a month's time. Thanks so much.